So good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to start again chapter 10. And chapter 10 includes the monopoly and the practice of the monopoly and the reasons of the monopoly. We are going to start by why we have a monopoly and what are the reasons of having a monopoly. You have to take in consideration that any monopoly have a word which we name it barriers. So what are the barriers? Limitation to enter the market. Is it important? Yes, it is very important because this limitation will hinder anyone to participate. So this is why we have a monopoly. When we have one seller, such as in the Gulf, for example, this means that we have one supplier, but here it is the government. If I have only one buyer, we name it monopsony. What the meaning of monopsony? I'm the only one who buying this product. So from where I got this power or not to allow anyone to compete with me, هنا we no competition, no competition. So is it good or bad? It depends. Is it good or bad? It depends. It depends on what? The objective of the buyers or the seller, of the buyers or the seller. So this is basically the importance of the monopoly. Maybe I put restrictions or barriers. Why? Because for safety, for the sovereignty over the country, for the protection of the country, not to allow anyone to intervene inside the country. So why we are using monopoly? I put this restriction in order for safety, for security. For example, مش معقولة هجيب حد يدافع عني على سبيل المثال، صح؟ مع ان بالرغم من كده we have Japan بتجيب حد يدافع عنها. Japan one of the country اللي ما عندهاش جيوش. She is not having any military power, but she is asking for. Why we're doing this? Maybe for safety, maybe also for social factor to support poor people. But also on the same time, we have objective also. I put profit if I'm a profit for a company, let's say vaccine. So this is why we have one company. They are trying to compete using Bahena research and development in order to hinder anyone to enter the market. Okay. So this is basically why we have a monopoly. We have a very well-known company, شركة Roche, which is producing the vaccine Tamiflu. And this Tamiflu, let's say, for example, it is one of the main importance treatment that has been taken during the swine flu. So this is basically why we have a monopoly and the importance of the monopoly. And why? Because I have a market power. What do you mean by market power? I can set the prices whatsoever I have. So this is basically the importance of having a monopoly and why monopoly exists in the market. Also in the previous lecture, we introduced the marginal revenue and marginal average revenue. And we said that the marginal revenue is the change of total revenue over the change of quantity. So if you see here, the quantity is increasing due to the drop of prices. And we said we have here a total revenue, as you see, and this total revenue is increasing to the price where the product was elastic, and then the product has been changed from elastic to inelastic. As you see as well, in the point where it changed from elastic to inelastic, dropping the prices was very bad because the incremental gain of revenue, الإيراد الجديد اللي هيجيلي, start to decline. Type. We said also when we are trying to draw the marginal revenue and the demand, we said that usually the marginal revenue is, what is about the marginal revenue? We said that a very important question, why MR is less, less is lower than mean the demand. And this question we tackled it last time. And we said why? Because the marginal revenue reflect the drop in price. So reflect the drop in prices. So The incremental gain is diminishing. Why it is diminishing? Because I decrease the prices. I have revenue, but this revenue is become, the gain of this revenue become lower. So, yes, exactly. بالظبط كده، هو نفس الكلام دايما above it or not. This is important. Why? Because I decrease the prices. صح؟ Why I decrease the prices? Why? سؤال جامد جدا دايما بنتسأله. Why monopoly decrease? Monopoly decrease the price. Why? Decrease the price. For two reasons. Number one, to increase sales. ما عنديش عايزة حاجة غير تانية. أو المونوبولي دوت عايز إيه؟ Get rid of the product. صح؟ يخلص من البرودكت، عايز يخلص منه، صح؟ and drop the prices. Or maybe there is a new product due to new product. صح؟ طيب هل أنا كسبانة ولا خسرانة؟ Can I determine if I have profit or not from this graph? From this graph أقدر أحدد إذا كنت كسبانة ولا خسرانة من الجراف ده. I'm asking a question and I'm waiting for answer. Do I have?
لا.
Thank you so much, my dear. Perfect. Thank you so much. Why? Because the profit is dependent on the TR. What is the TR? Total revenue minus cost. Once I have MIMBA, once I have total revenue, TR, thank you, minus total cost. Once I have the cost, I can determine if I have a profit or not. So only in this graph, I can just say what happened to the mean, to the marginal revenue, if it is above or below the demand. So in order to determine if I have a profit or not, so I have to recall the cost. If you remember the cost function, you will remember that the cost function is important because cost function, we have something called efficient scale, And this efficient scale, it is the intersection between marginal revenue and marginal cost. So marginal cost and average total cost. So I will start by drawing the marginal cost. What I did, I draw the marginal cost. Why? Why I draw the marginal cost? I draw the marginal cost because the intersection of the marginal revenue with the marginal cost بيديترمن ايه؟ الquantity of monopoly، الكمية اللي هينتجها مين؟ المونوبولي. Okay, very nice. So remember that we explained before that this marginal cost, it is the supply, and the supply reflect the cost. So if you look for the marginal revenue and the marginal cost, it is as if it is demand and supply. As if it is demand and supply. But in the case of monopoly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to determine, first step, what I'm going to determine, I'm going to determine the quantity that the monopoly is going to produce. So this is the first stage where we determine the quantity of monopoly. That's all. But since he have a market power, he have a capacity to differentiate between people, what he is going to do, he is going to look for the demand. Then how can I set the prices? So I will go to the demand curve. Why I have the demand curve? Because this demand curve will reflects on the prices. So the second step after I did this one, I determined the quantity of a monopoly. The second step, what I'm going to do, I'm going to determine the price of monopoly. So this is the price of monopoly, And here I determine the price. This is brilliant because I have what? I have the prices, and I have what? I have the cost. So I will put the price according to the demand. So this is the price. Price how much? Let's say, for example, 4.5. Very nice. Even I determine the prices according to the willingness and the ability of the people to buy. The willingness and ability of the people to buy. So where is my cost? If I go down and I search for the cost, I find this is the cost. Let's say, for example, it is 2.3. 2.3. So this is the cost. So it is very clear now. I have a price and I have cost. I have a price and I have cost. So if I'm going to look for the profit function, what is my profit function? I have to compare the price per unit minus the average total cost per unit, and then I multiply times mean times the quantity. So if we're going to substitute for this, so I have a price by 4.5 minus, let's say, for example, 2.3. So this is very clear that I can say that I have a profit from this equation for whatsoever number of units that the monopoly is going to produce. So I recap. I start by adding the marginal cost. So, and I assume that this point of intersection will determine the efficient of a scale. So here, if you remember the efficient scale, which is the intersection of mean, average, total cost with the marginal cost. As if I'm working with the efficient scale. So in this graph, we have a lot of curves. We have a very nice curve here because the intersection between the marginal cost with the average total cost, this is reflect on the efficient scale. Is it important, this efficient scale? Yes, because the efficient scale represent max output with minimum cost. So this is a very important point. So here I can determine that this monopoly have the power to increase the price. If this monopoly is using a single price, so he will set the prices at mean single price. This means it will be 4.5 and that's it, no more. But if he is trying to make discrimination, price discrimination, so he can set a price above or below, above the mean, above the 4.5, and then he makes segmentation, similar to the example when we say that we have a doctor and the doctor want to have the more revenues. So he said, if you are in hurry, you can pay more. If you can wait in the queue, you can wait and pay less. So this is called the price discrimination. The price discrimination is widely used when we're trying to have different types of prices for the same product. Let's say I mentioned to you my previous experience when I was allowing to use the fixed line, and when I went to the company, they said you have to pay 2,500 and you will have the line now, or you can wait for 6 months and then you have it. If we go for the monopoly output decision and we look for the maximization of the profit, you will have here the point of intersection. So as if I'm drawing it again. So I have a different point where, as you see, the first point where we have the intersection. What is this intersection? This intersection is very important because this is what we start with. This is the intersection of the marginal revenue with the marginal cost. And this intersection of the marginal revenue with the marginal cost help me to determine the quantity of the monopoly. This is intersection marginal revenue, intersect marginal cost. And this point, we can have here the quantity of monopoly, quantity of monopoly. So perfect. But here we don't have the same point as I drew it in the previous slide, where if I'm writing right now and I will highlight the point of intersection. So this is the point of intersection. What this point of intersection, if you remember that in the previous slide, I managed to draw the average cost with the marginal cost, but this point of intersection, as you see, it represents efficient scale. So is it important, this efficient scale? Yes, because this means that I'm producing with the maximum output with the minimum cost. So if you focus here, that means that this point that I'm going to highlight it just right now, if you see here, this is the efficient scale. So what do you mean by efficient scale? This means that this monopoly quantity of efficient scale, as if you remember that this efficient scale means yani the maximum output with the minimum cost. But what we can comment on the quantity of a monopoly, we can comment on the quantity of monopoly that he is producing with a higher cost, that he is still in need to increase production to reach mean the efficient scale, where he can produce more and he can increase his output to reach the efficient scale. Okay, and so if I want to determine the prices, this is the price of a monopoly, as we determine it according to the willingness and ability of people to buy, and it's determined by the mean, the demand curve. So I can do here what this is what we call it. I can do price discrimination. What do you mean by price discrimination? That I can set the prices with the less number of mean number of units. But if you look here, this is the best point for the monopoly for the price. And if I set the prices above the price of the monopoly, this means that lost profit from producing little quantity. What do you mean by this? That instead of, let's say, for example, giving numbers, if I am producing 2 tons here, 2 tons, and then I'm producing 1 ton. I am a monopoly and I have the capacity to produce 2 ton, but I produce only 1 ton. So this means that if I was producing the 2 tons times the quantity, price times quantity, then I have more profit. But since I produced less, this means this area, which is the differences between the too little quantity and the too high prices, they are setting very, very high prices. Imagine that you have a compound and the businessman, he is setting the prices, and then he's determined to increase the prices and sell the villa, for example, by 12 million. So not everyone will be able and willing to pay, let's say, for example, 12 million for this villa, let's say, for example. So, but if I can buy it with 7, but what he lose the people who have the capacity to buy at a million. So this is the capacity. He is the power. He is the decision maker to set the prices. So if he set the prices very, very, very high, so he lost profit. But why he's doing this? He is making for himself segmentation, distinguish himself in the market, where he can have a unique in the markets. So when I do price discrimination, this means this area, as you see, it is the area where we have a loss in the profit and a loss of due to the loss of a profit is due to selling too little quantity and selling too high prices. So this is the same drawing, but here I'm working underutilization. Underutilization, what means that I can produce more, but I produce less. Let's say, for example, I want to make not the product available for everyone. Some people do this in real life. So I can increase the price, I increase the quantity here. If I increase the quantity at Q2, so you will see that the prices will drop. I will accept not 12 million. I will not accept 7 million. I will accept 6 million. So here also it is a loss of a profit from producing too little quantity, Q2, and selling too much quantity, and too little A prices. So this is the situation behind it and about after it. So the quantity of monopoly is at the best point where he achieving the maximization profit. So if we can see the formula of monopoly output, this is the very well-known monopoly output, where the marginal revenue equal marginal cost. And this is what we said. This is what we drew. We said that we can determine the quantity of monopoly. And this is what I did in the drawing, that the quantity of monopoly, what we have, how we can determine the quantity of monopoly, simply by marginal revenue equal marginal cost. From where I got this, if you see the algebra for the equation, so this bar represent the profit of the quantity, revenue time is the number of units, which is the price. I think this is what I said. If I took the price alone and I take the C alone, average cost, so I can determine as well the profit through, as I did it in the previous slide. So you will see that the profit here equal what? It is equal price minus average total cost and then times the quantity. So you can determine the profit simply. So it is the same price per unit times quantity, cost per unit times the quantity. So the best point for me, the profit maximization condition, what we name the profit maximization condition, it is the marginal revenue equal marginal cost. Okay, so we use the mass, which means you remember as well here that in the cost we have explicit and implicit cost. Explicit and implicit cost. Explicit cost, which means the direct outlay of money, and the implicit cost therefore gone. So if we do differentiation, or we look for the change, what is the change? We know that change of total revenue divided change of quantity giving me marginal revenue. Change of total cost divided by quantity, it gives me marginal cost. So if I want the best point will be the profit maximization condition, which is marginal revenue. Marginal revenue, what about it? Marginal revenue equal the marginal cost. We determine the quantity, only the quantity. So this is the monopoly output decision, and this is what we draw with on the graph, the first point. And then we go for an example of profit maximization. So if you see this graph, it is normal equation when we look for the slope. So we just said that we have marginal revenue and marginal cost. Marginal revenue means change of total revenue. Marginal revenue means a change of total revenue divided by change of mean of quantity. So this is the marginal revenue, and this represents the slope. So the slope of what? The slope of the revenue curve. What is the revenue curve? So I will go here, revenue curve. So if I go here, for example, and I took the line, and then I'm going to draw a straight line to the revenue, a curve of the revenue. This is the straight line. And then I'm trying to do another straight line. Okay, so this is straight line. If I'm going to take the change, the slope of these two curves, so this is what represent the marginal revenue, and mathematically here, this is the marginal cost. And if you look to these points, this is the maximum point of profit. So this is the relation that we can draw it for the intersections between the marginal revenue. So the curve above, which means here, this is the best point. The best point, what do you mean by best point? The maximum profit, the maximum amount number of profit, I can achieve it from the marginal revenue with the marginal cost. So if we remember the same graphs so that we draw it in the previous slide, so we look for the intersection. This is the intersection of mean marginal revenue with the marginal cost. And if we go to the up, this will give me the maximum profit. So this is represent the maximization conditions. And this is the best number of units that I can have it, which giving me the maximum profit at the point where marginal revenue equal marginal cost. Do in reality, we have the same situation. If you are working according to this, somehow it approach to the point of intersection. Somehow it's approach to the point of intersection. But since we have using linear equation, by data, we can determine the real case. So if you look to this graph, this is the abnormal profit that I'm trying to explain. So you have a price here at 30, and this is the intersection point between the marginal cost and marginal revenue. So I determine the quantity. Again, I will use my line. So this point, where is the marginal cost? This is the point, the first point. What is this? It is the intersection of what? Intersection of marginal revenue with the marginal cost. So this can help you to determine the quantity. And then if I'm going to the point of intersection, this is the point of intersection. So the cost point of intersection of the marginal cost with the average cost, average total cost, which is giving me the lowest cost I can produce at this level. So how much the lowest cost, the minimum cost, it is $15. And then I determine the cost. This is the cost for me. This is the first point per unit. And if I go for the willingness and ability of people and I set single price, what do you mean single price? Only one price. There is no other prices. That is the only price. Then it is 30. So if I draw the equation or I write mathematically the equation, so do I have a profit here? So 30 minus 15 times the number of units, for sure, it have a positive value, and this is what we call it the profit that the monopoly have. Why the monopoly have the capacity to set the prices double the cost? Because he have monopoly power. What is the power? He use barriers. What is the power? He's the only seller. What is the power? He is the only one who can invent this product. So this is called the profit maximization condition. So a rule of thumb for pricing, how we can set the prices is to translate the condition BTA for the determining the prices. We are looking for the marginal revenue equal the marginal cost, and this is what we explain it in a very clear way. And when we go for the rule of thumb of pricing, how we can set the prices in any market, we have two components: the price per unit as a P brings for me for one unit. Yani for, let's say, for example, what is the incremental prices? What will be the effect of the extra unit? So the change of quantity here, it will be 1. What is the change of price? So the first point for me is the pricing. And then I have to go for the quantity. Because the firm face a downward sloping, so producing and selling these extra units will result in a drop of price. And this is what we explained it from the beginning. The monopoly drop the prices in order to sell more number of units, which reduce the revenue from all units sold, and the incremental marginal revenue will be decreasing as we explained before. So if we see this point, if I look for what we have here, price plus quantity times the change of price over change of quantity. So what we're trying to do here, what will be the incremental effect? So what is the incremental effect? This is the first part. يبقى 1 unit plus 1 unit and so on. So if I took the first P times 1, what is this one? This goes for the extra 1 unit. So 1 times P, it will give me the P. And then if I have a drop in prices, I drop the prices to increase more units. So this is another incremental quantity times the change of price times change of quantity. This formula is very important because if I'm going to take the P as a common factor, math, for example, common equation, so I will say that I will took the marginal revenue here will be equal. I have here P common, so I will took the P as a common factor, and then I multiply it times 1 plus what? What is this? Q over P times change of P over change of Q. I think this is represents something called elasticity. So it is 1 over elasticity of demand. This is the inverse of elasticity of demand. So this is basically the equation that I'm trying to determine the price. So how can I determine the pricing in any market? So it is highly depending on mean. It is highly depending on the elasticity of the product. So I have here P plus P, 1 over E over D. The formula that this part, all this part is 1 over D. So I will use 1 over D and I keep the P. And I know as well that the marginal revenue equal the marginal cost. So I will replace the marginal revenue with the marginal cost. Okay. And then if I'm using math, let's say for example, so since here marginal revenue equal marginal cost, then I will substitutes for or I can say I can replace a marginal revenue with marginal cost. So I have this equation. So I replace it. So I put, instead of MR, I put MC. So it's become MC with the same components, P plus P over 1 plus ED, the same equation. So I'm just here, I'm just substituting for this equation. Okay, and I have the marginal cost. So I would like to find the P. What are the determinants of the price? What are the main components of the price? So here, I have here marginal cost. I will transfer the marginal cost on the other side, and I will leave I can leave the marginal cost on one side and I transfer the prices on the other side. Okay. So if I keep 1 over ED and I want to transfer P minus P, P plus B, if I'm using the mass of the equation, then it will be P minus marginal cost over P. Okay. Because here I keep the 1 over elasticity of demand, and then I have P plus P, or I can multiply both of them over 1 over P plus P, or I can change it to the right side. So it will be P minus marginal cost over the price, over 1 over the elasticity of demand. Then if I want to have only, we can rearrange the equation, then the last formula will be the pricing of any product. It is highly demanding or highly determined by the marginal cost over 1 plus 1 over the elasticity of demand. Okay. So let's say, for example, I have a marginal cost of a 3 and the elasticity of the product given, let's say, for example, this is the marginal cost and this is what we are concerned. So the marginal cost is a 3 and the elasticity, the product, I know it, and you know how you can calculate the elasticity. So let's say that the elasticity is 2. So I can substitute in the equation and I can determine the price of this product. How much is the price? So this formula, we name it the markup. The markup. What is the meaning of markup? The meaning of the markup, the extra or incremental prices or value I'm adding over the marginal cost. This is called the markup. How much of extra? Let's say, for example, I produce this t-shirt, so that I produce it by 10 and I want an extra over it, let's say $5. So this is called the markup. How can I set the prices? You add the cost is 10 plus the 5. In a simple word, it will be the 15. This is what we call it, the markup. And it is a very important formula that my prices is highly affected of the marginal cost over 1 plus 1 over the elasticity of demand. So we know the markup equation, we know how we can determine the quantity of a monopoly, and I think it is enough for today.